The fastest way to discover who someone really is isn't to watch them when life is good. It's to let them believe everything you built together is falling apart. I never thought I'd test my wife, and if you had asked me a month ago whether Olivia and I had a strong marriage, I would have said yes without hesitation. We had been married for 16 years. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in a two-story house with a white fence, a maple tree in the front yard, and the kind of routine that makes people think everything is stable. Every morning, I left for work at 7:15. Every evening, Olivia had dinner waiting or was finishing up in the kitchen while music played softly through the house. We weren't perfect, but we were comfortable. At least, that's what I believed. The truth is, a strange thought had been growing in the back of my mind for months. It started after hearing stories from coworkers about marriages falling apart the moment money disappeared. One guy lost his job and his wife filed for divorce within 6 months. Another said his family treated him differently the second he stopped bringing home a paycheck. I laughed those stories off at first, but they stayed with me. Late at night, I found myself wondering something I hated admitting, even to myself. If I lost everything tomorrow, would Olivia still look at me the same way? The question bothered me enough that one Friday evening, sitting in my car outside our house, I made a decision I would later regret. I was going to tell her I got fired. It was supposed to be harmless. Just one conversation. Just enough to see her reaction. I walked through the front door, carrying my briefcase. Olivia was in the kitchen pouring coffee into her favorite ceramic mug. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. She smiled when she saw me. "You're home early," she said. For a second, I almost abandoned the whole idea. Then I heard myself say the words anyway. "I got fired today." Everything changed. The smile disappeared from her face instantly. Her hand froze in midair. The mug slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the tile floor, sending coffee in every direction. The sound echoed through the kitchen. Olivia stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It looked more like shock. Real shock. The color drained from her face. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. Not a single word. I expected questions. I expected concern. Maybe even panic. Instead, she just stood there staring at me. Finally, she swallowed hard and asked, "Are you serious?" I nodded. "Yeah, they let me go this afternoon." Her eyes dropped toward the broken mug on the floor. Then she looked away. "I need a minute," she said quietly. Without another word, she walked out of the kitchen. I stood there confused. That wasn't the reaction I expected. Not even close. A few minutes later she came back, but something felt different. She seemed distracted. Distant. She barely touched her dinner. She kept checking her phone. Every time I tried to continue the conversation, she changed the subject. By 10 that night, a knot had formed in my stomach. Then something happened that made my heart start racing. Olivia picked up her phone, glanced toward the living room to make sure I wasn't looking, and slipped out the back door. Through the window, I watched her walk into the darkness of our backyard. Seconds later, she raised the phone to her ear. I couldn't hear the conversation. I could only see her pacing. Then she suddenly stopped, turned toward the house, and looked directly at the window. Before I could move, she ended the call. When she came back inside, she acted like nothing had happened. And that was the moment I realized my little test might have uncovered something far bigger than I was prepared to find. The next morning, I woke up hoping the strange tension from the night before had been nothing more than shock. Maybe Olivia had simply needed time to process the news. Maybe I was reading too much into her behavior because I already felt guilty about lying to her. But the moment I walked into the kitchen, I knew something was off. Olivia was already dressed, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee in her hands. Normally she greeted me with a smile or asked how I slept. This morning she seemed distracted. Her eyes were fixed on her phone. The second she noticed me looking, she turned the screen face down. "Good morning," I said. "Morning," she replied. Her voice sounded forced. I sat down and waited for her to ask about the job situation. She never did. Instead, she asked if I wanted eggs or toast. That was it. No discussion about our finances. No concern about what came next. No questions about how I was feeling. It felt like the biggest event in our lives had somehow become invisible. Throughout the day, I stayed home to keep up the story. Around noon, I noticed Olivia step outside onto the back patio. She looked around before making another phone call. I could not hear much through the glass, but I caught a few words. "Yes, he told me yesterday." "No, He still does not know. My stomach tightened immediately. He still does not know. What exactly did I not know? When she came back inside, she acted completely normal. That night, things became even stranger. Olivia volunteered to run errands after dinner. That was unusual because we usually spend our evenings together. She was gone for almost 2 hours. When she returned, she carried no shopping bags. Not a single one. Where did you go? I asked casually. Just took care of a few things, she said. What things? She hesitated for half a second. Nothing important. Nothing important. Those 2 words stayed in my head long after she went to bed. Over the next 3 days, the pattern continued. Secret phone calls. Sudden errands. Vague answers. Then I discovered something that pushed my suspicion to a completely different level. I was reviewing our banking app one afternoon when I noticed a withdrawal from our joint savings account. $5,000. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Then I checked again and found another transaction. $3,000. 2 withdrawals in less than 48 hours. Nearly $8,000 had disappeared. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Olivia had always been responsible with money. We discussed every major expense together. That had been our rule for years. Yet here was money leaving our account without a single conversation. I waited until dinner to bring it up. I noticed some withdrawals from savings, I said carefully. Olivia froze for the briefest moment before taking a sip of water. Oh, that. Yeah, that. I needed it for something. What something? She looked down at her plate. I will explain later. That answer only made things worse. Explain later. Not now. Later. As if there was some secret timeline I was not allowed to see. That night, I barely slept. Every possibility ran through my mind. Was she hiding financial trouble? Was someone pressuring her? Was there another reason she suddenly needed thousands of dollars? By Friday afternoon, I convinced myself I needed answers. Then fate handed me something I could not ignore. As I was driving home from a coffee shop, I spotted Olivia's car parked outside a small office building on the other side of town. The sign out front was simple and professional. I almost kept driving. Then I saw her walk out of the building beside an older man in a gray suit. They stopped on the sidewalk and spoke for several minutes. The man handed her a thick envelope. Olivia accepted it and immediately placed it inside her purse. Then she looked around nervously before getting into her car and driving away. I sat frozen behind the wheel. Because at that moment, every innocent explanation I had been telling myself suddenly became much harder to believe. For the rest of that afternoon, I sat in my car across the street from the office building, staring at the entrance long after Olivia had driven away. The envelope bothered me more than I wanted to admit. It was not just that she had taken it. It was the way she had taken it. Careful. Fast. Almost like she did not want anyone to see it. Especially me. On the drive home, I kept trying to come up with reasonable explanations. Maybe the man was a financial advisor. Maybe she was planning some kind of surprise. Maybe there was a completely innocent reason for all of this. But every explanation seemed to fall apart the moment I remembered the secret phone calls, the missing money, and the words I had overheard. He still does not know. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my thoughts were running in circles. Olivia was already home. She greeted me with a smile that looked normal enough. But now I found myself studying every expression on her face. Every pause, every glance, every word. It was exhausting. During dinner, she seemed unusually cheerful. She even asked about my job search. The question caught me off guard because it was the first time she had shown any interest since I told her I had been fired. Any leads? She asked. Not yet, I said. I am still looking. She nodded thoughtfully. Something will work out. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me even more suspicious. A week earlier, those words would have sounded supportive. Now they felt rehearsed. Later that evening, Olivia went upstairs to take a shower. For the first time in our marriage, I seriously considered looking through her purse. The thought alone made me feel guilty. I had always believed trust mattered. But trust was becoming harder and harder to hold on to. After several minutes of arguing with myself, curiosity won. Her purse was sitting on a chair near the kitchen table. I opened it and immediately found the envelope. My pulse quickened. I carefully slid out the documents inside. The first few pages looked like legal paperwork. Most of it made no sense to me. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. My name, Michael Carter, printed clearly near the top of a page. I flipped through the documents faster. There were references to assets, accounts, and dates. Some sections had been highlighted. Others contained handwritten notes. I was so focused on reading that I almost did not hear the sound behind me. "What are you doing?" Olivia's voice froze me in place. I turned around and saw her standing in the doorway. Her hair was still damp. Her expression was impossible to read. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I slowly placed the papers back into the envelope. "I think that is a question I should be asking you," I said. Olivia looked at the documents, then back at me. Something flickered across her face. Not anger, not panic. It looked more like disappointment. She walked toward the table and carefully took the envelope from my hands. "Michael," she said quietly, "there are things happening right now that I cannot explain." I stared at her in disbelief. "Cannot explain or will not explain?" Her eyes lowered for a moment. Then she said the one thing that made my heart sink even further. "Please trust me just a little longer. Trust me just a little longer." Those words echoed in my head long after Olivia went upstairs that night. I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me, trying to understand how we had reached this point. 16 years of marriage, and suddenly it felt like I was living with a stranger. The worst part was that I could not decide whether I was more upset about the secrets or about the fact that I had created this situation myself. None of this would have happened if I had not lied about losing my job. But even knowing that, I could not ignore what I had seen. The missing money was real. The secret meetings were real. The legal documents with my name on them were real. The next morning, Olivia left the house earlier than usual. I watched from the front window as she backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. 10 minutes later, I grabbed my keys and followed. I felt ridiculous doing it. I was not a detective. I was a husband following his wife through suburban traffic on a cool Ohio morning. Yet I could not stop myself. Olivia drove across town and eventually pulled into the parking lot of a small jewelry store. I parked half a block away and watched. She stepped out carrying a small black case that I recognized immediately. It was the box where she kept several pieces of jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother. My chest tightened. 20 minutes later, she came back outside without the case. She climbed into her car and drove away. I remained frozen behind the wheel. Why would she sell family jewelry? We were not struggling financially. At least not in reality. As far as she knew, I had lost my job only a few days ago. That was not enough time to create an emergency. Unless she believed something much worse was coming. The questions kept multiplying. Later that afternoon, I checked our banking account again. Another deposit had appeared. Not a withdrawal this time. A deposit from a business I did not recognize. The amount was almost identical to the estimated value of the jewelry Olivia had once mentioned years ago. Suddenly, the pieces began connecting in ways that made no sense. Why was she raising money? What was she preparing for? That evening, Olivia seemed exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. She barely touched her dinner. Twice I caught her staring into space, as though she were carrying a weight she could not share. For the first time since this started, a different possibility entered my mind. What if this was not about leaving me? What if something else was happening? The thought should have comforted me. Instead, it worried me even more. Around 9 o'clock, Olivia's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs folding laundry. The screen lit up before I could look away. One message. One sentence. No name attached. Just a number. My heart nearly stopped when I read it. It said, "The documents are ready. He must not see them before Monday." The message stayed burned into my mind long after the screen went dark. He must not see them before Monday. I read it over and over until I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and stepped away as if it might explode. My hands were shaking. Whatever Olivia was involved in had a deadline, and somehow I was the person being kept in the dark. When she came downstairs a few minutes later, I forced myself to act normal. I asked if she wanted tea. She smiled weakly and said she was tired. That smile felt heavier than silence. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the same questions. What documents? Why Monday? And why was it so important that I did not see them? By Saturday morning, I made a decision. I was done waiting. If Olivia would not tell me the truth, I would find it myself. I spent the morning pretending to apply for jobs, keeping up the story, answering emails I never intended to send. Around noon, Olivia said she needed to step out for a bit. She kissed my cheek and told me she would not be long. I waited 5 minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys. I followed her again. This time, she drove to a medical office complex on the edge of town. My confusion deepened. I watched her walk inside, her shoulders tense, her pace fast. She stayed inside for nearly an hour. When she came back out, she sat in her car for a long moment before driving away. I did not follow her home. Instead, I sat there trying to make sense of what I had just seen. A lawyer, a jewelry store, a medical building. None of it fit together. Later that afternoon, I returned home before she did and checked the mailbox. Inside was a large envelope addressed to Olivia. No return name, just a logo from a legal firm printed in the corner. I did not open it. I could not bring myself to cross that line again. But seeing it there confirmed one thing. This was not a misunderstanding. Something serious was unfolding. That evening, Olivia cooked dinner like nothing was wrong. She even laughed at something on television. But when she thought I was not looking, her hands trembled slightly as she dried the dishes. After dinner, I finally asked the question that had been eating me alive. Are you planning on leaving me? The room went silent. Olivia slowly turned to face me. Her eyes widened, not in anger, but in pain. What? I need to know, I said. Because everything you are doing feels like you are preparing for life without me. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she shook her head. No, she said firmly. This has nothing to do with leaving you. Then what does it have to do with? I asked. She hesitated, then looked down. I cannot tell you yet. Because I am not supposed to see the documents before Monday? The color drained from her face. She looked up sharply. You saw my phone. The truth hung between us, thick and heavy. She did not deny it. She did not explain it. She only whispered one sentence that changed everything. I am trying to protect you. Edit. The message stayed on the screen for only a few seconds before it went dark, but that was all it took. I read it twice. Then a third time. The documents are ready. He must not see them before Monday. Every alarm bell in my head started ringing at once. Monday was only 3 days away. Whatever was happening had a deadline, and somehow I was the one person being kept in the dark. I stood there staring at Olivia's phone on the counter, fighting the urge to pick it up and read the rest of her messages. Before I could make a decision, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I stepped away just as Olivia entered the kitchen. She grabbed her phone almost immediately and glanced at the screen. For a split second, I saw concern flash across her face. Then she locked the phone and slipped it into her pocket. Everything okay? I asked. Just a reminder about something, she said. Her answer came too quickly. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The more I thought about everything, the less it added up. If Olivia was planning to leave me, why was she selling family jewelry? Why was she moving money into our accounts instead of taking it out? Why did she look exhausted all the time? None of it fit together. Yet the secrecy continued. The next morning, Saturday, Olivia announced that she needed to spend a few hours out of town. Where are you going? I asked. Just handling something important, she replied. The same answer again. Something important. By now I hated those words. About 20 minutes after she left, I got into my car and followed her route using pure guesswork. I was lucky. 45 minutes later, I spotted her vehicle in the parking lot of a small office complex in a neighboring town. This time I parked farther away and watched carefully. The same older man from before arrived a few minutes later. Gray suit, briefcase, professional appearance. Definitely not someone who looked like he was having a secret affair. They entered the building together. Nearly an hour passed before they emerged. As they stood outside talking, I noticed something unexpected. Olivia looked emotional. She wiped at her eyes once and nodded several times while the man spoke. Then he handed her another folder. Before leaving, he shook her hand warmly. It looked less like a secret meeting and more like the conclusion of something significant. I waited until they drove away before approaching the building. The directory near the entrance listed several businesses, insurance agencies, accounting firms, real estate offices. Then I saw the name that made me stop cold. Peterson and Cole Estate Attorneys. I stared at the sign for several seconds. Estate attorneys. Suddenly, dozens of new questions appeared. Why was Olivia meeting with estate lawyers? Why was my name on legal documents? Why was everything scheduled around Monday? As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Olivia. Just 6 words. Can you come home right now? Protect you. Out of everything I expected Olivia to say, those were the last words I imagined hearing. I stared at her, waiting for an explanation that never came. She looked exhausted, like someone carrying a burden far too heavy for one person. For a moment, I almost believed her. Then I remembered the hidden phone calls, the missing money, the lawyer, the documents, and every secret she had kept over the past week. Protect me from what? I asked. Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes filled with frustration. Michael, please. Just give me until Monday. That is not an answer. It is all I can give you right now. I wanted to push harder. I wanted to demand the truth. But something in her expression stopped me. She was not acting like someone caught doing something wrong. She was acting like someone desperately trying to prevent something. The problem was that I had no idea what. That night, neither of us slept much. The distance between us felt wider than the king-size bed we shared. Every time I glanced toward her side of the room, I saw her staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. Sunday morning arrived with a strange silence hanging over the house. Olivia spent most of the day organizing paperwork in the home office. Every time I walked past the room, the door was closed. Around lunchtime, her phone rang. She stepped outside to answer it. I watched through the kitchen window as she paced across the backyard. The conversation seemed serious. Then I noticed something unusual. She was crying. Not dramatically, not uncontrollably, just quietly wiping tears from her face while listening to whoever was on the other end. When she came back inside, she had already composed herself. If I had not seen it myself, I never would have known. That image stayed with me for the rest of the day. It did not fit the version of events I had created in my head. Sunday evening brought another surprise. Olivia announced she needed to go out for a couple of hours. She seemed nervous, almost anxious. The moment she left, I found myself making the same decision I had made several times already. I followed her. This time she drove farther than before, nearly 30 miles outside the city. Eventually, she pulled into the parking lot of a small office building that was still open despite the late hour. The same older man I had seen before was waiting near the entrance. I parked across the street and watched. They spoke briefly before walking inside together. Almost 90 minutes passed. When they finally emerged, the man handed Olivia a thick folder. She hugged him unexpectedly. It was not the hug of a romantic relationship. It looked more like relief. Gratitude. The kind of hug people share after surviving something difficult. Then the man said something that I could not hear. Olivia nodded. As she turned toward her car, a loose sheet slipped from the folder and drifted onto the sidewalk. Neither of them noticed. The moment they drove away, I crossed the street and picked it up. My hands trembled as I looked down. At the top of the page was a name I had not seen in over 20 years. My father's name. My father's name hit me harder than anything I had discovered so far. I stood alone under a streetlight, staring at the paper while a cold breeze moved through the nearly empty parking lot. For a few seconds, I honestly wondered if I was reading it correctly. My father, Richard Carter, had been gone from my life for more than 2 decades. The last conversation we ever had ended badly, and after that, the distance between us became permanent. When he passed away several years ago, I attended the funeral, paid my respects, and assumed that chapter of my life was closed forever. Yet here his name was, printed across the top of an official document connected to all of Olivia's secrets. I quickly folded the page and returned to my car. My heart was racing the entire drive home. Questions flooded my mind. Why was Olivia dealing with paperwork connected to my father? Why had she hidden it from me? And why would a lawyer be involved? By the time I walked through the front door, Olivia was already home. She was sitting on the couch, staring at a television that was turned on but clearly not being watched. She looked exhausted. For a brief moment, I almost pulled the paper from my pocket and demanded answers. Instead, I said nothing. Something told me there was still a piece of the puzzle missing. Monday morning arrived with an unbearable sense of anticipation. The entire house felt different. Olivia barely touched her breakfast. She checked the clock repeatedly. Around 10 o'clock, her phone rang. She answered immediately. I watched her expression change as she listened. First concern, then relief, then something that looked almost like gratitude. When the call ended, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Everything okay? I asked. She looked at me and hesitated. I think so. That was all she said. Around noon, she announced that she needed to leave for one final meeting. The words "one final meeting" immediately caught my attention. Whatever had been happening for the past week was reaching its conclusion. After she left, I sat alone in the house trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to follow her again. Another part of me was tired. Tired of suspicion. Tired of secrets. Tired of feeling like my marriage had become an investigation. Then I noticed something on the kitchen counter. Olivia had left a folder behind. It was not the thick folder from the lawyer's office. This one was smaller, plain, unmarked. I stared at it for nearly a minute before finally opening it. Inside was a collection of documents, financial records, property records, legal correspondence. And then I found the page that made everything stop. It was a letter from the attorney handling my father's estate. According to the letter, a substantial inheritance had recently been discovered and legally verified. The beneficiary named in the documents was me. I read the sentence 3 times to make sure I understood it. My father had left me something significant. But the real shock came from the date on the letter. The attorney had mailed the first notice nearly 3 months ago, and the person who had been communicating with him ever since was not me. It was Olivia. For several minutes, I sat alone at the kitchen table holding the letter while my entire understanding of the past week began to shift. The inheritance explained the lawyer. It explained the legal documents. It even explained why my father's name kept appearing. But it did not explain why Olivia had hidden everything from me. According to the paperwork, the estate included investment accounts, a small commercial property, and several assets that had remained tied up in legal disputes for years. The total value was far beyond anything I expected. Yet instead of feeling excited, I felt confused. If this was good news, why had Olivia acted as though she were carrying a terrible secret? I continued reading. The attorney's notes revealed that Olivia had been handling communications because there were unresolved legal issues requiring immediate attention. Deadlines, signatures, verifications. If certain requirements were not completed on time, portions of the inheritance could be delayed for months or even years. Suddenly, I remembered the phone calls, the meetings, and the constant pressure she seemed to be under. Then I reached a page that made my confusion return. Attached to the legal correspondence was a list of financial transactions. Several of them matched the withdrawals I had seen from our savings account. The jewelry sale was there too. My stomach tightened. Why would Olivia need to use our money and sell personal jewelry if a large inheritance was coming? None of it made sense. Before I could continue, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Olivia was home. I quickly returned the documents to the folder and placed everything exactly where I had found it. Moments later, she walked through the front door. The first thing I noticed was that she looked lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but relieved, as if a burden she had been carrying was finally beginning to lift. We exchanged a few ordinary words about lunch and errands, but underneath the conversation, I could feel the truth sitting between us. That evening, while Olivia was in the shower, her phone rang again. I had no intention of looking. I was exhausted from spying and second-guessing. But the caller left a voicemail, and the notification appeared on the screen. Before I could stop myself, I glanced at the transcription preview. It contained only part of the message, but what I read sent a chill through me. The specialist confirmed the timeline. We should not wait any longer. I froze. Specialist. Timeline. The words had nothing to do with inheritances, properties, or legal paperwork. A terrible possibility entered my mind. Was someone sick? Was Olivia hiding a medical problem? Was that why she had been visiting the medical office? My thoughts immediately jumped to her. Had she received bad news? Was she protecting me from something far more serious than financial issues? When Olivia came downstairs later, I studied her face. She looked tired, but not physically ill. Then another possibility struck me. What if the medical appointments were not for her at all? What if they were connected to me? The idea seemed ridiculous at first. Then I remembered something I had completely forgotten. 3 months earlier, during my annual physical, my doctor had ordered additional testing after finding something unusual. The follow-up results had been delayed because of administrative issues, and I had never thought much about it afterward. But as I sat there staring at Olivia across the room, a terrifying question formed in my mind. What if she knew something about my health that I did not? The next morning, I could not carry the uncertainty any longer. As soon as Olivia came into the kitchen, I placed the folder on the table between us. The color immediately left her face. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she slowly sat down and looked at the documents. "You found them," she said softly. I nodded. "I found enough to know this is about my father. I found enough to know there is an inheritance. But I still do not understand why you have been hiding everything from me." Olivia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she finally looked at me, there were tears in her eyes. Because the inheritance was never the real reason I was scared. My heart sank. She reached into her purse and pulled out another envelope. This one was different. It was from a medical specialist. 3 months ago, after your annual physical, your doctor requested additional testing, she said. The results were delayed, and there was a mistake with the contact information. The specialist reached out through emergency contacts. They reached me. I felt the room go silent around me. Olivia continued. The doctors found something that needed further evaluation. They believed it was treatable, but they wanted additional procedures as soon as possible. I did not know how to tell you. Then, a week ago, you came home and told me you had lost your job. She paused as tears rolled down her cheeks. In that moment, I thought everything was falling apart at once. Your health, our finances, our future. So I started preparing for every possibility. Suddenly everything made sense. The withdrawals, the jewelry sale, the meetings, the phone calls, the lawyer, the medical office. Olivia had not been planning an escape. She had been building a safety net. She had been preparing resources in case we needed treatment, time off work, travel, or anything else that might come. The inheritance changed everything, she said. Once the attorney confirmed it was real, I knew we would be okay financially. I just wanted all the paperwork finished before telling you everything. I sat there stunned. For over a week, I had convinced myself that my wife was hiding betrayal. In reality, she had been carrying fear, responsibility, and uncertainty completely alone. Then the guilt hit me. The entire chain of events had started because of my lie. I looked at Olivia and finally told her the truth. I had never lost my job. It had all been a test. A terrible test. I expected anger. Instead, she laughed through her tears and shook her head. Michael, I knew something was not right almost immediately, she said. But when I thought there might be a problem with your health, your little test stopped matching. At that moment, I realized the lesson had never been about trust in her. It was about trust in us. I spent days looking for evidence that my wife would leave when life became difficult. What I found instead was proof that she was preparing to stand beside me through the worst possibilities she could imagine. The inheritance was eventually finalized. The additional medical evaluations brought reassuring news. Life slowly returned to normal, but I never forgot what happened. Because the day I tested my wife was the day I discovered the depth of her loyalty, her strength, and her love. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow for more stories like this.